There's a poem by a Jesuit named Daniel Bellarmine, and the poem is called Less Than. And in this poem, it begins, excellence was not the fault. And it continues talking about the ways in which he carries this secret, a laugh up his sleeve, through all of the years of his life. He wrote this in his 80s. The next stanza begins, courage was not the fault. And then he goes on to say how through all the years that they carried him shoulder high, years they ate him like a sandwich, they're one and the same. But these two things he carried with him, excellence and courage. The poem ends with a fairly modest urging, as he says, don't kill. Don't leave the earth befouled. Stand somewhere and don't hoard. It's an incredibly pithy poem, also an incredible poem because when you consider the ways in which he lived his life, the way he poured his life out for the cause of justice, the way he would do things that some would label as being fanatical or too theatrical or too this or too that. The intention with which he did these things was for the sake of preserving life, preserving a sense of our unification, of our common body that we share as human beings, and ultimately about the Spirit of God that resides within each of us, which is accessible to each of us if we are able to listen through the maelstrom of competing voices for that still small voice that leads us to love, that leads us to mercy, that leads us to hope and faith, and ultimately that we need courage to follow. I think of this poem today especially in light of what has been happening in my home city of Minneapolis and the ways in which we have seen a lot of very, very difficult things over the course of these previous weeks. In particular, I think of the murder of two people who were shot multiple times by government agents. And I think of the way of which we saw video of this, and then we heard the account, the official account of the narrative that was given, and I heard in my own mind playing again and again, who are you going to believe, me or your lying eyes? It's a strange thing when you witness something, you see something, and you see it from multiple angles, and then you are told not to believe what you see, but instead to believe a particular narrative of what it is that you witnessed. And it's especially difficult when we realize that what it is that we are trying to struggle with is not whether a law ought to be enforced, or not whether a policy ought to be in place, but rather whether we should allow for the dignity of life and the dignity of human beings to dictate the way that a law is enforced. This is a very difficult time for me. I'm happy that we had a snow day last week because if I had to preach on Sunday morning, I probably would have said things that would have gotten me burned. The reality, though, that we have to live with is this, is that we live in a world where there is extraordinary injustice. We live in a world where there is inequality. We live in a world where the difficulties between the haves and the have-nots are not becoming closer. They're not getting easier to navigate. They become harder for us to navigate. They're even harder for us to navigate when we fail to recognize the dignity of the person who is directly in front of us, the dignity of the people that we are here to care for. What we hear in the readings today from the gospel, we hear the Beatitudes, which is this extraordinary reversal of our understanding of what it is to be a human being. He talks about, blessed are those who hunger and thirst. What? Blessed are those who mourn. What are you talking about? Blessed are those who are persecuted for the sake of righteousness. We only understand those words if we understand what this life is and what it is that we are being prepared for. A lot of times in this parish especially, you'll hear the term that we are resurrection people, and it's true, we are. What it means is this, is that we understand that in this particular world, that we are called to live in the joy of the gospel. We are called to stand in the middle of difficult situations, and rather than offering violence for violence, we offer peace in the midst of violence. Rather than offering rage for rage or hate for hate, we offer love and mercy in place of both of those. We become the kinds of people who recognize that the assault that we face as we are living in this world, living in the Spirit of Christ, is something that is worthy for us to bear because of the promise of the resurrection. But here's what we also have to understand. There is no resurrection without that. There is no such thing as a resurrection without the crucifixion. And why this is so important, it has to do with that last line of Daniel Berrigan's poem. Stand somewhere. When we are not aware of the crucifixion, when we are not aware of the corpse, when we are not aware of the body of Christ that is currently being crucified in our world, we are not aware of those who struggle under oppressive poverty. We're not aware of those who have to live with ignorance and lack of education or lack of opportunity. In fact, what we do is we relegate those people to a particular section of our environment, or we limit those people to a particular section of our world, and we take no responsibility for bearing the love of Christ to them because, well, they've had their chance, or I'm just too tired, or I have my own things to do. And that, brothers and sisters, is us avoiding the crucifixion. That's us when we are choosing to seclude ourselves from the good that we are called to for the sake of our own preservation, for the sake of our own well-being, for the sake of our own selfishness and self-centeredness. Instead, what we are called to, it is in these images all around us on the walls. The stations of the cross. We are called to be the kind of people who, when we are witnessing the evil of the world, we take faith in the resurrection of Christ. We take faith in the Spirit that was shared with us. That Spirit which fills us with love, fills us with joy, can fill us with a sense of hope. And in that Spirit, we ask God to show us, how do we encounter people in the midst of that suffering? That is us being resurrection people in the face of the cross. We use the Spirit of God to think about these terms of the Eucharist and these terms of the Word. We allow that Spirit of God to enter into us so that our own vision can be transformed, not so that we get saved, but so that we understand the transformation we receive here is intended to bring us out into the world, to help us participate in salvation. Do you see the difference? It's not about us getting somewhere personally. It's about all of us moving in one direction. The question we have to deal with right now in our lives is, where are we going to stand? Where are we going to stand in the midst of violence? Are we going to give witness to the reality that, yes, there are laws that need to be enforced and there are ways in which to enforce those? And the ways in which we're going to choose to do that is by acknowledging dignity and peace and care. Are we willing to be the kind of people who stand in the midst of difficult circumstances and rather than returning violence for violence or hate for hate, we find a way to live rooted in the gratitude of the life we have received and the joy that is promised in the gospel and the hope of a future that is as of yet uncertain. As we go out into the world this week, remember, the Spirit of God is real. It is the most real thing there is. And that Spirit fills you. It rests right in here. And it is a Spirit that can lead you to that place of peace in the midst of difficulty. But not for your sake. It's a peace you are meant to share. That Spirit of God, it will fill you with a sense of love for humanity, but not for you alone. It is a Spirit that you are meant to share. And even in the midst of these difficult times, even in the midst of uncertainty, even in the midst of people who are bent on destruction and hopelessness and fear, the Spirit of God lets us see something new, transforms our vision, and lets us bear life to the world. Because that life has been given to us to share. Let us go, brothers and sisters, out into the world to be that change, to be the transformation that the world needs to see. Not because we are the ones who are bringing it, but because Christ is doing this in us, and so we can bear his life to the world.